Okay, let's hope Screencast-O-Matic is going to help me prepare the rest of this lecture because I had some trouble. I almost lost the other half, which is what happened as to why you didn't get the second half yet. I was I was buffering and buffering and buffering, and I keep coming back. And anyway, here we are. Let's finish this thing up real quick, and then I'll put 17 on and 18, and we'll be done. And we're going to meet tonight anyway, so this is great. Um, we are going to be using Microsoft Teams in the fall, but we'll still be using Screencast-O-Matic for those times that we will pre-record our lectures. We will have all of that information for you very shortly so that you understand and can prepare for the fall, but also know that we will have in-seat at least a quarter of the time, if not a little bit more, where you guys actually will be able to come and sit and social distance, and we'll have to wear a mask, but we'll be able to see each other and have that in-class experience that so many of you miss. But we're also going to be safe and have a good chunk online as well, just to make sure that everyone is completely safe. And we'll have a mask break at an hour after we're in class for about an hour. Probably won't do 3 hours anymore. We'll probably do 2 hours even when we're in seat, just to be safe. Okay, so let's talk about the general adaptation syndrome, or GAS. So we have this general adaptation syndrome for stress. Hans Selye, he identified 3 phases of this syndrome that occur when we have a lot of stress. So when we basically stay in stress too long, we know so much about the impact of stress on our bodies and how much of a maladaptive effect it takes. And here we have the internal, external forces that cause stress, and then coping is a really important part of what we do as therapists, right? Helping them to learn how to cope. And then this is his theory here, or his proposal of a syndrome. Celia basically said there were 3 phases of prolonged stress: alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. The first stage is alarm, just like it sounds, fight or flight. This is where your heart rate starts to raise and you have some physical and some physiological responses. Your palms are sweaty, you feel nauseated, you heart is racing, you can't get your breath, and your the warning system has gone off in your brain. Something has triggered the limbic area to have an emotional response, and your hormones are being released so that you can get ready to do what you need to do to run or fight. Celia was really right about, he was very correct in what he was saying here, and this is from The Body Keeps the Score, so thank you for this research. But if you stay in fight or flight, so you stay continued up in high stress, in a constant state of arousal, it can wreak havoc on your mind, body, and your spirit. So if you are in that prolonged state, you start to damage, because that we were designed to stay up in alarm, right? And your body is going to start to put up a resistance. That high level of pituitary gland hormones, ACTH, they disrupt the balance in the body and start to damage your body in multiple ways. And you see this in a lot of those medically unexplained illnesses, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, lupus. A lot of those have been linked back to being a body being in prolonged stress. And obviously, adverse childhood experiences, prolonged stress and trauma are the same thing here. And it does, in fact, our body. It does make us ill. And so this is what happens. And I'm so glad that it makes a lot of sense if you start working as a clinician, especially when you specialize in trauma. Then obviously you get exhausted, just like it says, right? It's exhausting. Prolonged resistance, and the body's reserves are completely gone. Start to have big issues, emotional, physical health. You can't return homeostasis. Your body is in disarray. And this is where you see all of the heart disease and high blood pressure, insomnia, kidney disease, headaches, and a whole host of other things. Really interesting stuff. Stress, mental health now. I think I was just speaking with someone this week who said that all professors in higher ed need to be completely well versed in mental health, and clinicians, primary care doctors. We are becoming just like primary care. We will be like primary care. People now know that the mental health is causing all these other issues that are physical in nature. And so if we don't deal with the mental health aspect, patients won't get well. So there's a really strong correlation between heart disease and stress. Obviously, you probably know that, right? But there are two personality types with different risk of cardiovascular disease. And so, isn't this interesting for us? So, if you have a type A person versus a type B person, the risk is different. A type A person is just like what we probably know. They're extremely competitive. They have intense anger. They have hostile tendencies. They can be restless, aggressive, and impatient. In contrast, people who have type B, it's a little bit different. They're like calm, easygoing, relaxed, not hurried. Optimism is one way that really combats stress. And think about it, as we all know, cognitive therapy, right? We know it changes the brain. So when you're changing what you think in a more optimistic way, that's going to reduce your stress, your feelings. You see how all this works together so beautifully, and we really are a part of a holistic wellness team when we are counseling because there's so many aspects our clients can benefit from mental health treatment. Um, Feelings of adjustment and well-being improve. And so levels of stress, worry, and anger are often reduced, and there's more ability to cope in this age range, middle age. So middle age and attachment. So attachment issues follow you throughout your life, and it's something we can help our clients heal from. So just keep that in mind. Someone can drastically change their life if you heal the attachment wounds. It's remarkable, really, because you want people to get to secure attachment because the indication is that they're going to have less anxiety and less depression and et cetera, and they're going to be happier. Then we know fearful avoidant personality type, so that avoidant attachment style has negative emotions and poor relationships, obviously, right? And not to mention the other types of attachment disorders like disorganized. Um, and then also a lot more death. So if you get a client who's had several deaths, perhaps a death of a parent, and then subsequently grandparents and a friend, it can really affect their attachment in middle age. So making sure that you're watching for that pattern as a clinician is really, really important. Personality. Personality traits become fixed after 30 years of age. But we did have that other research talked about some things changing, remember, in middle adulthood with personality. That was in the first part of the lecture. So just remember that. So longitudinal, cross-cultural, and cross-sectional research discussed these personality characteristics as stable. They're the big five, the five factor, right? We've got neuroticism, extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness. And make sure you know what that is and the definitions of those, what they are. Neuroticism, excessive worry, self-absorbed, erratic, emotional, vulnerable, can be overly sensitive and highly nervous. Extroverts are energetic, affectionate, talkative, outgoing, enjoy company of others, and they are outgoing and passionate. Agreeableness, friendly, compassionate, empathetic, compliant, trusting, generous and affectionate, conscientious, ambitious, self-controlled, organized, reliable, efficient, self-disciplined, openness, open to experience, ideas, creative, liberal, um, inventive, and curious about new ideas. So just make sure you know those, and you probably remember those from other courses. That's really important. Family development issues. We are finishing up here. So of course, family plays a big role in this stage of life. Family adjustment to crisis. Um, we know a crisis can be anything that is causing disarray in the family. It really can be any kind of job loss or death, or sometimes something positive can cause some crisis, depending on what that is. Maybe late pregnancy, where they didn't they're surprised or something like that. And it depends on what your client says, right, what it is for them. So when a family goes through a crisis, there's usually these three stages that have been identified: the adaptation, um, disorganization, and recovery. So let's start with the beginning. Um, some members of the family may continue to function on a comparable or higher level during adaptation. During the disorganization period, the family declines and traditional roles and routines can become distorted and jumbled. There's more anger. And the final phase is recovery, and that's where new behaviors may be incorporated. And each family is different, and not all families recover. Sometimes they dissolve. You'll see this happen when there's a death, like the matriarch, patriarch of the family, or someone who kind of held the family together, and they pass, and the whole family is stressed about loss, right? And sometimes someone will take over that role, but sometimes they don't. The whole family falls apart and they're all fighting. So you'll see exact this play out. And I'm sure most of you have seen this in your own family systems. We've all probably had some type of crises in our families, I'm sure. So we have grandparenthood, empty nest, and the boomerang generation. But I bet you didn't know there are three types or styles of grandparenting. Very funny, isn't it? We've got involved, compassionate, remote. So of course the involved are really involved. They have clear hopes for the behavior of the child and they're very involved. Compassionate are calm and they provide support and camaraderie. And then of course remote, they're aloof and uninvolved, disconnected and withdrawn. So you can kind of think about how your own grandparents were in your life, and they're such an important part of our lives. My grandparents were just everything to me, and gosh, I miss them every day. So I'm going to start crying on this PowerPoint. But if you have yours in your life, be grateful if you have the involved and compassionate kind. We know that empty nest can be really hard time for parents when the children leave the house. Also, when one leaves and then the other one leaves, it's just a different dynamic in your family. There can be some isolation, some depression. Um, let's see. Also, an external factor is this boomerang generation um, that affects relationships. So that's when um, they return to live with parents. According to some statistics in our text, 15.6% of 20 to 24-year-olds are unemployed versus 8.7% of 25-year-olds. There's a big return of adult children. It can cause a lot of difficulty in parent-child relationship. Need support, need counseling. Recommend counseling for the parents. Try to get hooked up with services for the family system. When this is happening, it's going to be happening a lot right now. So, none of our textbooks have written about the pandemic, and no research has come out yet, at least some of it's starting to. But I know that this is going to the boomerang generation. That's happening a lot. A lot of you are home. And what is that like? And what is the impact? And support and coping is really, really important as a clinician during this time. And divorce. Most divorces do occur. We've already talked about this in the first 5 to 10 years of marriage. Only a small percentage divorce after 20 years of marriage. But the divorce rate's risen in comparison to previous generations because it's more accepting, like the kids leave the house and they feel like they don't have anything in common. So it can be really hard. Children of divorce are at risk for a lot of problems. Um, Making sure they're co-parenting and having strong parent-child bonds can help mediate that. Most people do remarry or have a partner within 2 to 5 years, and they ordinarily have positive the outcomes for themselves. The men are very more likely to remarry than women. Let's see, career, career development, and then we'll be finishing up with this and going on to 17. So this is where you really should have, if you want to have that satisfaction, and you see people wanting to maybe switch careers or do something different or get involved, or they have some um, more meeting making and they're like that generativity is coming out here, and sometimes it's limiting because of technology, and trying to get a job can be difficult in this age range. um, Change in careers can come from a lot of things like divorce, getting downsized, our economy, the pandemic. 1/3 of employed people are in the midlife stage, and a lot of times downsizing means they don't want to pay the salary of the person. And people finding themselves forced into career change can have a lot of psychological issues. So you'll see this. I mean, this is something you would see as a therapist. Um, Adult learners are shown to have higher cognitive abilities in midlife, which is really positive. Adult learners will need a lot of extra support and a lot of patience in trying to find them support as a therapist. What can they do to make sure they increase their support system, helping them be assertive and talking to professors and learning how to navigate academia is really important as well. There's a great graph on the top of 16. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, 384. And I want you guys to do your form response on it. There's a graph that people display stress in different ways. Please check off if you've experienced any of these symptoms. I want you to look through these and uneasiness or restlessness, sleeping patterns, strain in family relations, avoiding social situations, quick to anger, loss of contact with close friends, and substance dependency. I would like you to reflect on this and note and just write some of the ways that you've experienced more stress during the pandemic. Do not put anything that you're uncomfortable with. If you haven't had any stress, you can write that too. Just please don't put anything that you're uncomfortable with. I mean, maybe you've had trouble sleeping or stuff like that's not going to be too harmful to share. Um, or strain in family relationships, just whatever you feel comfortable with. I mean, you guys are pretty close, but that'll be your forum for this chapter. And women, there are a lot increasing women in the workforce as opposed to 20 years ago. 40, almost half of women in 2010 were in the workforce, and even more now. But men make more than women, and the roles are definitely different. Women are still expected to do quite a bit, although that is leveling out. We talked about that in earlier slides. And leisure and planning for retirement is really important in this stage. And sometimes if people haven't done that, they'll want to talk about it and they'll be stressed about it and they'll want to come up with a plan, and that might be a treatment goal. So people with higher education and income are more active than those with less education or income, which makes sense because you have more time and you have more resources. You're not retired, but you have to start making plans for that. And middle adults are working longer. I mean, look at the college, right? Look at some of the professors. It, they don't know if they're leaving anytime soon. Okay, spiritual development is a really big part of middle adulthood. They're most is important for midlifers and leads to strong psychological well-being. And that is it. There's some good reflection questions, but that is not your form, and I am done.